So it's going to be really important to think about where you're working, especially because you're working at home. So you need a flat surface. I'm working on our kitchen table. One of the things I've always enjoyed about printmaking is that you can work on your kitchen table. So I think that, none of this is something which is unusual. In fact, there's really great textbooks about kitchen printmaking that you can look at. So I have sort of things kind of set up right now. I have a big open area that I can print in or I can carve in. And so I'm actually just going to show you how I'm going to roll up a little block for you. So what I'm going to need to do this is I'm going to need my inking space, and I'm going to need to make sure that I've got all the things that I want to keep clean outside of my inking space. So I've got some things in here that I don't need in here while I'm inking up my block. So now I've got things pretty well open for some inking. So I'm going to need my palette and my block. And so I have these over here. So I have a little palette and I have just a little block that I have for this demo. So the palette, as you can see, is just a piece of glass that I've taped to like this back of this board. You have some palette paper in your kit that will work really well. So you can go ahead and use that. I would say then what you want to do is probably like tape around the outside edges with some of your masking tape to help keep it together, because as you roll across it, sometimes it lifts up. But if you have trouble with that, or if you want to, that's just a piece of glass I found from a frame in the house. And it was like an old frame, so I took the glass out. Plexiglass won't work. It needs to be glass because the plexiglass will scratch. And also you can't really clean it as easily. So I have my palette, and I have my little block and my brayer. Again, as we discussed during the other video, the roller isn't like this flat on the surface. You can see the handle then hits the surface. It's actually like this, so you can see that it's the roller's not touching the table. Now I have a towel down so I don't scratch the table. So those of you who are printing, in your dining rooms and things like that, you want to protect your surfaces. So a towel will really help do that, or even some cardboard underneath the towel will actually add an extra layer of protection. So now I've got my ink out, and I've got a inking knife. If you don't have an inking knife, which you might not do, but if you do, if you're home, this is just basically a drywall knife. If you're somewhere where you have a garage with some drywall kits in it. I also have a wet wipe, which is, this is like a shop wipe, but a paper towel that's wet will work. And what I'm going to do is now we're going to start to talk about this with technical language. So this is my inking slab. So I'm going to lay out some ink. This water-based ink dries real fast. That's the biggest drawback. You can add a little hair of Vaseline to it, and that will slow it down from drying out so fast. But obviously we need something water-based because you're at home. Not water-based, but water-soluble. So I'm going to pick up some of the ink. I'm going to put out what we call a ribbon of ink. The ribbon of ink needs to be big enough that it's going to cover my brayer. So I'm working on such a small slab here. I know that I'm going to need to probably take up the whole slab with the brayer. Then I'm going to ink the brayer. I'm going to push forward, pull back, and lift. Push forward, pull back, and lift. And every time I lift, it spins. If you don't do the lifting, you won't get even coverage on your brayer. So you want to make sure that you're doing that lifting action. I'm standing up. If you sit down to do this, it's actually much harder. A lot of the stuff you're going to have to do, I would suggest doing standing up, because if you're seated, it's actually really a lot more difficult to control how you're using your body to exert pressure. So we have to think a little bit about ergonomics. So forward, back, lift, forward, back, lift, forward, back, lift. You can turn it this way too if you're only doing a single color like we are right here. So now the brayer has an even coating of ink. And I move that to the side. And we're going to get ready now to apply the ink to the block. Okay, so I'm going to put down a piece of newspaper to ink on top of, and then I just have some newsprint to print on because this is just a little demo piece. You can use sketchbook paper, or printer paper would be even better. If you're pulling a practice print, we call a practice print a proof. So if you're pulling a proof, just a piece of printer paper will work. So, or newsprint. I'm going to roll up my brayer. I'm going to start to ink the block. Add a little bit more ink to the slab. It's a bit dry already. While you're inking, you might notice that if you're in an area that's drier, that the ink will dry faster. So if you're near like the heater, it might dry out faster. So kind of be aware of that. So now my ink is applied to my block. Now to print, I'm actually going to put something hard down, like a board. The towel might be a bit too soft for this. I'm going to take my block and I'm going to lay my block down. Right now, I'm not really worrying about registration or where it's going to land up on the paper. We won't worry about that for the first project or two. Now, y'all are going to get a baron. It looks a bit different. It's a flat piece of bamboo wrapped around a handle. That's going to work really well. I have this. I made this years ago and I still use it. It's just a doorknob glued to a piece of molding. You can see how much I've used it over the years. But one of my favorite printing tools is this, which is a wooden spoon. This is a really old favorite wooden spoon. I've had this for a really long time. It's a great thing to print with. You don't need a really expensive tool to print. You can just use a wooden spoon like this. I'm going to apply pressure to the back. Now, one of the biggest things is applying the pressure, but also not moving the block, because otherwise you're going to get a fuzzy image. I'm going to pick up the corner and have a look. So I'm going to go back over, apply a bit more pressure. So there's my little proof. Now, to clean this up, because it's all water soluble, it's really great. I'm going to take this off of the board because I'm trying to keep the board clean. And put it back onto my newspaper. And then I just got that wet shop towel. And so that's going to come right off. With this water-based relief ink, because it does dry fast, it will build up real quick. So sometimes I suggest like removing the ink periodically, even if you're printing kind of again and again, because it will dry and create a texture on the block. So that's pretty clean. Once you use the block once, it's never going to be clean on the inside. Like these negative spaces, they'll never be clean once you've printed, because you move the ink down into those spaces and it stains the linoleum. But still try to clean in there as much as you can, because if you don't get it clean, then those negative spaces then will start to print, and you don't want that. To clean the brayer, same type of process. You know, water on a paper towel will do this. Or if you have shop rags, they're great. Like these are the called Tub-O towels. These are really great pre-moistened shop rags. But a paper towel with water on it will work as well. One of my favorite things to use is a Clorox wipe, but we know that's really not appropriate right now since they're so hard to get. But these Tupper rags and things, they don't have any alcohol in them or anything like that, so they're easier to acquire right now in the current situation. Make sure you get underneath. You all have this piece of metal, it's just in a different place. Make sure you get underneath. Otherwise, sometimes the ink will like hang there and drip down while you're inking. So try to make sure you get that taken care of. And then that's not quite clean yet, so I'm just gonna grab another rag. Make sure it's really clean. Make sure you clean the sides of the brayer real good. The palette, easiest thing to do and the best thing to do is just scrape it down. And then go ahead and use the same rag to remove the ink. And then this ink is non-toxic. It's not really gonna have any sort of like effect on you if you get it on your skin or anything. You just want to be as clean as you can be, of course. Even when you're printing at the school, I really strongly emphasize the students' cleanliness, because cleanliness is key when printing, so that you don't spend a long time printing something or getting something ready to print, and then suddenly you put down your paper and it gets all messed up. So then once you're done, then put your printed matter somewhere safe and put away all your tools.